something I learned very quickly is that not all developers, and in fact, I haven't really met many developers who actually know much about SEO. So the first bit is buy-in, and for them to understand as much as you do how this fits into like the overall strategy and how important it is, because they're going to have to weigh up against other things that the business are doing. You have to acknowledge that SEO isn't necessarily the be all and end all of the whole business. It's our thing, and obviously like we care about it really deeply, but there are going to be things that the business deems as more important. They've only got a certain amount of developers, so why should they be using that development resource to do what you're asking them to do? That's what they need to know, really. Always tough fighting resourcing battles, but that's, I think, part of pretty much any business in any area that you work in. You are never going to be just always top of the list unless you're the CEO and you're like, get this done. And then it doesn't matter whether or not it's the most important thing that needs doing, it's going to get done before my tickets for sure. Obviously, you're going to be taking resource away from the other things that you've got in your queue. Then see if you can jump on the bandwagon a bit and get something pushed through, because that's what people are hyped about. I've not had to do that, but I would. Those are your wins. Get them in, because if it doesn't take much development time and it's gonna make a big impact, get them done.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Search with Candour, the podcast where I interview the best and brightest minds about SEO and digital marketing. I am your host, Jack Chambers Ward, and this week I am joined by Alison Moss. Alison is going to be talking all about how to actually get your prioritization sorted for technical SEO fixes, how to actually get dev tickets done, how to communicate with developers and stakeholders so your recommendations actually get actioned. I know it's a big problem for a lot of us working with big teams and working with developers, both internal and external. So hopefully, I think this conversation will be relevant for you no matter what position you're in, whether it's agency side like myself or in-house like somebody like Alison. It's a really great conversation and will hopefully give you some tips on how to actually get your technical SEO fixes and suggestions actually actioned. Before I get to my conversation with Alison, I'd like to let you know, in case you missed it, Search Norwich XL tickets are on sale right now for our early bird price of just £75. It's happening on the 24th of September 2026, and you can go and check it out basically by searching either Search Norwich XL, or one word, on Eventbrite, or searchnorwich.org, and you can go and find us there, buy your tickets. The prices will be going up on the 24th of April 2026, 1 month after they went on sale, so bear that in mind if you want to get the cheapest possible price and get it for just £75 for an amazing one-day conference with an incredible lineup. I'd recommend you go and check that out now. And I'll be doing a live podcast collaborating with the fantastic Sarah McDowell and Tasman Sullivan from the SEO Mindset podcast on the 29th of April. That's the day before Brighton SEO in Brighton. Tickets are free, and we're in a brand new, incredible venue called Ironwork Studios. So please do come along, check us out. There'll be food, there'll be a brilliant conversation all about the efficiency paradox and why AI isn't actually making your life easier. I think a lot of us probably have the idea that AI is helping and speeding things up and helping us become more efficient. Turns out that's not actually the case, and there's a lot of studies and experiences to back that up. Tasmin, Sarah, and I will be talking about our experiences and our thoughts around this phenomenon and basically giving some advice on how to or how not to use AI in your work to make your life a bit more happy, healthy, and efficient. So, Search Norwich XL on the 24th of September 2026, and a live podcast coming up on the 29th of April 2026. I'll put links for both of those in the show notes if you want to come and check them out. And now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Alison Moss. My guest is a senior SEO analyst in the gaming sector who has worked in content and SEO for over 12 years. She also has experience in film production and is the most infamous tiefling sorcerer in SEO. Welcome to Search with Candour, Alison Moss.
Hello! How are you?
I'm good, thanks, mate. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm very excited to talk about developers and prioritization. It's something that I deal with on a daily basis. So I'm looking forward to getting stuck in.
Definitely. Yeah. I think it's a really interesting topic and something I think a lot of us don't necessarily talk about enough, I think, in many ways, especially, me working agencies. I know you have a lot more experience than I do working in house, but wherever you're working, you're going to have to deal with this sort of stuff. If you're trying to implement technical changes, you're trying to make changes on a website, whether that's with your team of developers, whether it's with an external agency or whatever it is, you're going to have to talk the talk with the developing team and get buy-in from stakeholders and understand sometimes the internal politics of it all, right? And I think that's what makes it such an interesting conversation.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a few different kind of levels to the whole process that I'm sure a lot of people will be familiar with. So developers are just one aspect of getting something getting something technical done. And they're kind of almost at like they're kind of like the last point to a degree. You kind of start off with us with our idea of spotted something or we want to optimize something. Then from there, we generally will be talking to um, more of a mid ground person. So whether or not you're working agency and you're kind of having to deliver it into whoever your contact is, who's then going to potentially send it on, or whether you're an in house and maybe you're working with product development. Who will be taking in all the kind of requests from around the different areas of the business to then funnel into the development team, or whether it's a development team leader who's helping kind of prioritize those and sorting out which developers are picking those items up. There's actually a huge amount of people throughout that process, not even considering if you've got any kind of if it's something that you've discussed with any more senior stakeholders that will then want to kind of be involved in that whole thing. And so yeah, it's a much bigger process than I think I certainly ever thought it would be when I was getting into doing more of this technical stuff. And it's it's one that I think is a really interesting thing to get used to. I know I've had a huge learning curve over the past few years that I've been really focusing on the technical side and working to get technical fixes and new requests sorted with our teams.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's something we all encounter, like you said, as soon as you want to get into the technical side of things. And I know plenty of the viewers and listeners are on the more content side of things, but this also applies for component implementation and you might just have noticed you need to change something or make a little I don't know, an update or anything like that. And it can be a drawing blood from a stone process, or it can be a nice, easy process when you're all mates with the developers and people can actually help you get what you want done. So I guess I'm going to start with what you think some of the most common pitfalls are for us as SEOs trying to get our recommendations actioned. What are the things that could be done better that we should be doing to help this process be a bit more smooth?
So I think the main two things that I would say are basically because you are usually dealing with things, as I kind of mentioned already, at a bit of a dual level. So what you've got to do as part of this, or my biggest, I suppose, pitfalls would be, or the two bits that I would say definitely need to be considered are that you need to have the buy in for it, and you need for whoever is managing the workload of the developers. Um, Obviously, I work for quite a large organization, and so for us, there's a couple of different people that potentially help with that aspect. And a lot. So the first bit is kind of buy in, and for them to understand as much as you do how this fits into like the overall strategy and how important it is because they're going to have to weigh up against other things that the business are doing. So, for example, some things that you will come across are potentially like they've only got a certain amount of developers and development resource. So why should they be using that development resource to do what you're asking them to do? That's what they need to know, really. And they kind of need to know that in the most basic terms that they understand. So going into loads of SEO spiel about, href lang and how that, it's, and how Google crawls and all these things, they can be really useful if you've got people who are really interested in knowing that level of detail. And probably the more that you work with teams around technical stuff, the more they'll be interested in that sort of stuff, because the more success you see with certain technical stuff, the more kind of automatic buy-in you'll get, and then the more interest you get as well. And that usually comes, I'd say, with results. But from an initial standpoint, you want to make sure any barriers to their understanding of the importance of what you're putting forward are down. So some of the key things to really think about is making sure you've got a really, really good understanding of what it is that whatever company, whoever you're doing this work for, what they're trying to achieve, what's the most important thing to them. For example, it might be purchase, as is their kind of conversion point. It might be that if you are working for somewhere that's, needs people to call them up, it's leads. It's a contact of some form. So you need to really understand what it is that's it most important. What's the end goal of the whole reason that you're trying to get traffic to the site? What's the end goal? Once you know that, you can then start thinking about how your suggestions fit into that chain. How does that work? So, for example, you come across a site where whoever's built it, it's been built, and I've seen this firsthand on some sites where you've got like a non-click button that reveals more content, but that's from completely hidden from search engines. Now, that from maybe a software product development perspective looks fine because it works great for a customer, right? That's not impacting the customer experience. If anything, they like it. It's a nice little click. They get a nice little pop up. Looks lovely. Looks great on site. But so it's great for the customer, right? They're like, this looks lovely. I love it. The design's great. But we know that that's essentially invisible content. And it might be really important content that's actually working towards that goal of converting someone. It might be some really good information that someone's then going to be like, great, I want to convert now, whatever that conversion may be. So you want to then put that into terms that whoever is in charge of prioritization is going to really understand. So something that's probably relatively easy, although we're not necessarily, even though we may be moving slightly away from some of the really basic metrics of clicks and impressions and things like that, for really, once you're really getting into justifying all of your results moving forward. But some of those really basic ones can just be a really easy thing for people to understand if it's something that's genuinely blocking just those initial basics. So you can certainly go on and say, this due to this means this is invisible to robots. That's going to mean that this page is going to rank less well for queries around your key topic that you're trying to convert from. We do this, that will make it better. You'll get higher rankings, more clicks, more conversions, right? Fairly basic way of kind of doing it. If you can get any supporting data as well, that's always great. So if you can show them core performance that's currently existing, if you can look at how much general conversion is from that page, and then you can show them sort of the potential that if they increase the ranking, they're probably going to get just off the bat from, general organic performance increase, then you're probably going to be able to get enough buy-in for them to do something about it. But I think, it's really about making sure that you're putting it into a context that means something to them, and that means that they can prioritize that against the other work that they've got coming in, because they might have new products that they're trying to build out on the site, that they've got, buy-in from really high stakeholders, and, that they're getting loads of pressure to get created and done. So you're battling against all of those other business priorities that are potentially they're getting a lot of pressure on to deal with. So yeah, that's kind of the first thing I'd say. You really, really want to sell the idea and really put it into terms that whoever is deciding what gets done can understand. And then the second part is really the stuff that you do with the developer. So you might find that some of your work goes pretty slowly once it gets to the developer. I would say probably the number one cause of that is that what you've put together is not necessarily very clear. And so they don't really know what to do with it. So they might not put as much time into it. So the kind of second part of that is making sure your technical requirements are really clear as well, because you need to have a really clear reason for why the work needs doing, and then it needs to be really clear what you are actually aiming for with it. Because something I learned very, very quickly is that not all developers, and in fact, I haven't really met many developers who actually know much about SEO. And I certainly took for granted when I first got into this process that, they're people who've worked on websites before. They should, they probably already know what some of these technical concepts are. And I found out very quickly that they don't. And so then it became a kind of a bit of a stage by stage process, to be honest. Of then it starts off as a one line, we need a canonical on this page, to then, oh, it needs to be self referential, and, let's clear off any parameters as well, make sure that it's always just the bare URL, really, really basic stuff, but they don't necessarily know that. So having really clear technical requirements and making sure you use things like acceptance criteria, that help you kind of lay out all of the different scenarios that you need to make sure things are functioning for, will really help clear up what they need to do technically and what they need to develop, and then they'll be able to do it a bit quicker. Not always correct, but that's the fun of new technical work, is troubleshooting afterwards.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. For anything you want to get done is translating it into the language that that person speaks, right? And I think this is, you're totally right, it's true for developers, but also like getting buy-in from C-suite people who are even less technically minded and less aware of what's going on. Like you said, when you can get that ticket or that plan or that tactic or whatever it is and sell it in a way that is benefiting their goal. So we fix this will make more money, for example, is the way you sell that to somebody in the C-suite. Whereas to a developer, you might word it as, oh yeah, we'll fix this and this will make your life easier going forward, because then you won't have to, fix 100 pages when it all breaks and cascades later on. And I think that's a lot of where I've definitely gone wrong. I am very much a splurge and give you all the information at once kind of person. I am a very high context communicator, but I think it's finding that sweet spot of like the right amount of context, right? You don't want to just like throw all the information at everyone and you just give the same thing to a dev as you would to the CEO. But also you don't want to just be like, this thing's fixing. End of sentence. You're like, why?
Yeah,
How?
and
What benefit is it to me?
yeah, exactly. And actually, like, I'm very similar. I am also quite a I will give detail. If people don't stop me, sometimes I'll just keep going with oh, and this is why, and this is why. And sometimes that can get really confusing. I'm much better with my written communication, which probably helps with putting together the technical stuff. What I also would really encourage people to do is, when they're doing the technical stuff, is um, when you're putting together what you want to go into the ticket, what I found very, very helpful is getting from whoever sets up tickets. So, like I've mentioned, product development, whoever is, um, who's a lot of the time actually be building the ticket to then be delegated to someone. Um, is asking them for like the template of what they need in that ticket. It might vary differently from company to company on exactly how they do things. And then also similarly for the point at which you are putting together the information, because they might already also have like a template that they use for other areas of the business in terms of like if they're making new requests, like a template that's like summary of request, business, business, I've lost a word, business benefit,
Yeah.
so they
Yeah.
might already have something that means that you don't have to do as much thinking when you're putting things together. You can kind of use the template, and then ask them for a couple of examples, because that's always helpful as well if they've got a couple of examples that they can share with you. And then you can just kind of mirror and then you're giving people what they're used to, which is generally breaks down a bit of a barrier already, because they already then don't have to translate what you've written into a format that they're used to kind of understanding. They've already got it. They know exactly where to look for what information, and especially when it comes to writing up stuff to go into tickets, a lot of the time they'll probably just be, because they may not fully understand exactly what you're asking for. If you're asking for something quite technical, they'll probably just be copy pasting things in to whatever tool they might use. If it's Jira or something else, they'll probably be copying and pasting what you've written in. So if you put it in a format that's really easy and is really understandable for the developer, then hopefully breaking down some of those barriers to getting the work done quickly.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's such a big part of just trying to be not everyone's best mate, but getting on everyone's good side, right? Not pissing everyone off along the way, because I think that's something I've definitely, like I said, been guilty of earlier on in my career, was like just throwing information at people, and then the various different stakeholders involved being having to sift through one long, I don't know, task list or prioritization list, and be like, can you just like give me the stuff that I need to do? Where do I fit in all of this kind of thing? And that prioritization, I think, is such a key part of actually getting stuff done that has that impact, right? How do you go about prioritizing that stuff when you have to have those conversations? How are you weighing up sort of, you mentioned resources obviously being a huge part of that, but I guess like benefits versus resources, is that the kind of main sort of like balancing act I guess you're
Yeah,
trying to do
I'd
in that
say
process?
that'll be what they're looking for. I think you yourself, when you've got, so say I've had it before where we've done like some kind of release, and then post release you'll do some testing, you might identify a bunch of issues. You can just keep throwing them at them, and a lot of the time you'll probably find that you're giving them actually quite a lot at the same sort of level of what you would say is like urgency to do. um, so it's really good to just keep stepping back, looking through that list and really thinking about what in what order do you want those done in. Once you've got everything together, what order do you want those done in? Because then you can give them that as extra guidance as well. So, you know, really, really consider what, you know, they might all be what you term as high priority. And honestly, that happens. That's most of the case for a lot of what I send through is like high priority. But then if I'm sending through quite a lot of stuff, I'll take a moment to really like consider what the impact of every single one of those issues is, and try and put them in some sort of order then that they can take away, because a lot of the time they also won't have that context of exactly like what needs to be done first. If you're sending them all over and you're not prioritizing them, or they're all of a very similar level of priority, they just won't know enough about it to be able to. That's your job to guide them on those kind of things. So it's really important that you then maybe try and put it together in a list with like a priority, and then potentially wherever you also can, making sure that alongside that priority is the kind of reasoning, like if it's issues, what's this causing, what's the long-term issues with this happening. And so you'll know, for example, if you've got half your site throwing out like 500 errors, that needs to be fixed. That needs to be fixed like now, even if you've got something else that also needs to be fixed very, very imminently. But that's, you know, you know in your SEO heart of heart what needs to get fixed right now, and what can, as much as we're like, no, that, that's really important, it's really important, but if it's fixed tomorrow, that realistically the risk is still, it's not going to make a huge amount of difference just a day. I say that, and then sometimes it does, but you just have to kind of live with that when the developers don't have enough resource to get to it straight away. But yeah, I would just say, like, really trying to help them out with prioritization and justification is just so key, especially if you're firing quite a lot of things at them at once.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really, I guess, like the balance there is always something we talk about when we're having conversations with our clients of how realistic is this to actually implement in this time frame, right? I know there's something I talked about. I had our director of strategy on the show a couple of weeks ago talking about how you convince clients to do that kind of stuff. Like, you can do that all day long. If they don't have the people to do it, then it's not going to get done. You can say, we should write, all loads of content. We'll send you 15 briefs a month. Like, they don't have a writer on the team. Like, who's writing this stuff? And the same is true for technical stuff, right? You're totally right. If you don't have the resources and the human people to actually do this stuff, then you can recommend all day long, but it's not actually going to get anything done. And you can end up with a huge backlog of stuff that is just sat there being ignored, all that kind of thing. But like you said, when everything hits the fan, you're getting 500 errors, just suddenly the whole site is down or anything like that. That's when you realize, oh yeah, stuff can get done if you actually have an emergency and you have to prioritize stuff properly.
Exactly. And I think, you kind of have to acknowledge that SEO isn't necessarily the be all and end all of the whole business. It's our thing, and obviously, like, we care about it really deeply. But there are at points going to be things that the business deems as more important. That is just a fact that you kind of have to learn to deal with, as does everyone who's dealing in any singular area of any part of the business. I'm sure there are people whose tickets are stuck behind my SEO tickets that are like, why isn't this getting done quicker? And it's because I've been able to show that my work needs to be done first. Great. Happy days for me, not so great for them. You've got to remember that you are part of, like, an overall business machine, not just this, the whole business isn't necessarily SEO. Yeah, there's somewhere it's certainly, like, one of the very prominent parts of the business. But in those cases, you will generally, I would imagine, if you're proving your case well enough, be getting, the kind of the resource that you need as quickly as they possibly can. But yeah, it's always tough fighting resourcing battles, but that's I think part of pretty much any business in any area that you work in. You are never going to be just always top of the list unless you're the CEO and you're like, get this done. And then it doesn't matter whether or not it's the most important thing that needs doing. It's going to get done before before my tickets for sure. But yeah,
Exactly.
so
Yeah, I
it's
think.
and that's also why it can be really good if you do have if you are able to sell some of your ideas, especially for new stuff, get buy-in from C-suite level people. You can get things, done a bit quicker. But I would always say, like, pick your battles whenever it comes to all that sort of stuff. You
Mm.
don't want to play your ace up this. You don't want to be trying to play your ace up the sleeve every time, because you'll just annoy everyone. Like, you want to be as much just a part of the general process of how all these things go, unless it's something super, super important that's, absolutely vital and not getting done.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Like, actually thinking about whether you need to pick this battle right now. Like, that's a huge part of prioritization. And I know I had a conversation with a friend who works in house the other day, and they were talking about, like, I think it was an external agency was coming in and being like, we need to sort out all your core web vitals and stuff. And a classic tech SEO thing of like, okay, why? Because, and I was like, um, do you want to just like put it through page speed insights and just send a report back to them? Because I'm getting like a 93. So what benefit do they think they're getting from this? Like, are they just making busy work for themselves at this point? It's like, kind of,
I think
probably.
sometimes you've got
Yeah.
to be careful of some of these places go, oh, you need to do your core web vitals, but you need to make them better because they're like, well, people think that sounds important, doesn't it? And I mean, it is important if it's bad, but you know, if it's good, like, yeah, you can always improve, but is that where you want to put your resource when you've maybe got other things outstanding? And again, from a business perspective, are you going to push that if the business has got other things that need doing? And actually, you know, what you've got is not going, it's not a needle mover. You know, whenever you're considering all of your priorities, you know, there's some great, I can't remember the name of any of them off the top of my head, but there are some great ways of like assessing priority. And I'm sure there's one that's got a real name that I do not know, where you can put it in a like a table, plot out a table basically, where it's like, you know, how long something will take to do versus importance. And then you can plot out kind of what your tasks are. And if it's, you know, you're obviously low time, high importance. Those are your wins. Get them in, because if it doesn't take much development time and it's gonna make a big impact, get them done. You can give some people results and show them, right, look, if we do tech stuff, look at this improvement that we can do. Look at what the good things we can do with this. Then you've got kind of your high impact long time, and then you've got your kind of like lower impact short period of time, and then you can kind of figure out what, you know, what you're going to put in where. And you know, you might think that some of those lower short wins again will add to the general momentum. You know, your minimal gains theory, there you go, there's one. So you might, you know, decide to get those ones done first, or you might plug in with the right, these are big wins, but they're going to take a bit longer, let's crack on with those, and then we'll come back to some of the lower priority stuff. So yeah, I think just prioritization is just such a huge part of technical SEO in terms of, especially if you've got a lot that needs doing.
Yeah, definitely. The Matrix, funny enough, we literally had a team call, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, that talked about like executive function and stuff. We have a neurodivergent like ERG here at Candour, and the Eisenhower matrix is the one you're thinking of with the four boxes and stuff. And it's I'll put it up on the screen for viewers and stuff so you can see what I mean. But it's like urgency versus importance. And you have, if it's not urgent but very important, you need to schedule it in. If it's very urgent and very important, you need to do it now. If it's not important and not urgent, delete it, get rid of it. And if it's very urgent but not important, you probably need to delegate it. So it's like a
Yeah.
nice little bit of an oversimplification. Obviously, that's not exactly how every task works, but a rough idea of me as a person, and I know you experience similar things as well, like having to have a big list of things and just being like, I need to work out 50 different things in order to do 10 things, you know, breaking it all down, all that kind of stuff. Suddenly that, in theory, should make it easier. Like, yeah, break it down into smaller tasks. Like, no, that actually makes it more overwhelming. That makes the list longer. So being able to split it up into here's what I actually need to think about now versus I can worry about that later is a massive help to me when I'm thinking about anything, let alone technical implementation.
Oh, 100%. I do it with my tasks anyway. Like I've previously had kind of made my own sort of like, of course, I'm a millennial, so of course it's an Excel spreadsheet. It's of, you know, and then I set myself like a date on which to do these certain things, and then I hide anything that's not today's date, and it suddenly makes it seem so much less overwhelming how many tasks there is to do when you're just narrowing it down to like the two or three things that you've got to do that one day, rather than your big back all the other bits of stuff. So in general, it's really good to use those kind of matrices to help with your overall how you deal with work, if especially if you're like us and and go, oh my god, we've got so much to do, I don't want to do anything. um but yeah, that is just a general great tip. But it really helps with technical stuff as well, because it helps you kind of set what are the things that are the most important things and that you can get done, that you can then put your energy towards pushing, versus what things am I maybe, am I putting a lot of energy into this change, but actually the results probably not going to be, worth it. And again, that's where, you have maybe some ace up the hats of, if you do have a good relationship with any C-suite or higher up people, you've got something really big that is going to make a really big difference and you're struggling to get it through, try and get their buy-in and go that way. But like I said, I think it's always best to just work really hard. And I suppose the one bit I've not really gone into is building relationships with all these people as well. So giving them clear information, and targeting things to them is absolutely the right way to go at all points of your relationship with them, because it makes their lives easier, and anything that makes their lives easier, they're going to be thankful for. They might not say it, but they will be. And but yeah, as much as you can. And I know sometimes that might not be possible in all the roles that people play, to kind of get close to these individuals within the business. But if you can, especially if you're in house, you can spend time really building up. I was very lucky in that I did already have a really good relationship with one of the product development managers, because I'd worked with him in previous content roles. So by the time I was doing this, I already had a really good relationship with him. But with, there's still new people that have come into that mix, and individual developers that I've built really, really good relationships with, and some of their team leaders that I've built really good relationships with, where you can then, as you get more familiar, have slightly more frank conversations about, dude, this is actually really important. Please, please, can we get this done? And it's not always going to work, but as long as you've really put good cases together, and then building that relationship on top is also just like a really nice extra thing to do and it just means that they're more comfortable as well asking you questions. So if there is anything that they don't fully understand, make yourself available. I always make myself available as much as possible to all of them. So if they need me for anything, I do a lot of testing with my developers, with the developers that we have now as well. So I get involved a lot in the testing process, so that when it goes live, I've usually seen it pre-go live in some cases. For the big ones anyway, for like big projects, I'll make sure I'm really involved in that process, and test those, and I'll become like a testing point prior to things going live, just to try and minimize as much as possible the things, because I've been doing this for a few years, and I've worked through so many not giving enough info, having things go live and being like, this is completely wrong, things not having been done at all, from not following it up properly within the projects and things like that. So it's really, really important to also just get really stuck in, make yourself available, try as much as is possible for you to do, getting involved in any testing, getting involved with helping developers come up with the solution, and also just really being available for them to check things over with you. Oh, if there's something you've not thought of, and they go, oh, well, if we do this, it's going to result in this. And I go, then they can check that with you and make sure that you're happy that that's, from an SEO perspective, it's fine technically. You can check from an SEO perspective that it's also fine. Yeah, write things up in their language and get involved.
Yeah, I think that's a really good part of it, is like actually getting involved and being on good terms with people. Be a nice person, be nice to work with. There's that classic thing I know, I think it's we're talking a lot of like diagrams this episode for some reason, but there is a 3 circles or a triangle, depending on how you visualize it, where it's be good at your job, deliver your work on time, or be nice to work with. If you do 2 of those things, people will forgive the third one. If you're always late, but you're nice and you do good work, people will probably forgive you being late. If you're on time and you do good work, people might forgive when you're a bit of an arsehole. When you are on time and a bit of an arsehole, they might, and nice to work with, they might forgive bad work, right? Or less quality work. And if you can be nice to work with, it literally said there, like, somebody I worked with previously. It could be as simple as like you previously worked with them, or you have an existing relationship with somebody on the team from an external agency or internally or whatever it is. Like, I had an example a couple of years ago where a client of mine, we didn't even realize this at the time, we worked at the same place a few years previously. And then we were like, hold on a minute. And like, we'd since both like changed our surnames and stuff. And I was like, hold on. I remember we had that conversation in this place and this place. Like, oh yeah, mate, how are you? Yeah, oh my god, how's your dog? How's this? Da da da. Suddenly it turns into this thing, and then you have that little in instead of. I mean, I'm not saying don't go through official channels, but sometimes you can just pop a little Slack message of like, do you reckon you could get this stuff done like today or like sooner rather than later? Maybe get that little, uh, friends with
That
like
definitely works
little
with
extra.
content teams.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely works with content teams. I'll say technical teams it doesn't work so well with, but that's only because it has to go through developers and processes and ticketing systems and all that stuff that it's often not quite as easy. But yeah, like content team wise, that's perfect guidance as well. Because if you can just pop someone a message and say, "Oh, we've just noticed this little gap. Do you reckon we could get something? Reckon we could get something written up today, maybe?" Um, that's the perfect opportunity for those. But yeah, that's why relationship building is really key, and you can have similar conversations within the tech world. It's just usually a bit more like maybe asking for advice, like some because I know quite a few of the developers and the team leaders now. I will be able to ask them things like, "Oh, have we considered this in this project? Have
Mm.
you got anything in for this in this project, or do I need to make sure that's or do I need to go to X person to make sure that that's being done?" And so you can kind of like get little ins on things and find things out to be able to then make sure that things go through the right process. I think is probably the way that I would use that more from like a technical standpoint. You can ask more questions, more what I would term as stupid questions. Just be a bit more honest about kind of, "Oh, I'm not really sure about this, to be honest. Can you help me clarify? Because it's very technical and I'm an SEO person. I don't know everything about, how everything's working across the whole technical spectrum of the site. So I'm just want to clarify this particular thing." And yeah, so you can ask a lot more questions of them as well as giving them access to ask a lot more questions of you as well.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. For me, I think you can get into that tricky situation, like you mentioned earlier, right? You get the CEO who's like, right, this thing needs doing. Have you ever had that experience where you kind of have to, not necessarily fight back, but maybe push back against somebody who is an important person, don't get me wrong, a stakeholder in this process, but maybe not as technically minded. And they're like, right, we need to do this thing. It's like, if we do that, it might break stuff. Like, are you sure you want to do that? How do you go about having those kind of maybe difficult conversations with the other members of who might be involved in that process?
So I wouldn't say I've had that experience directly. What I would
Good.
say is something that I come across almost every day is the general resourcing stuff where maybe there's something that they're working on that to me might seem like it's maybe less important, but it's more important because of who it's come from. And so therefore sometimes if you've got something really urgent, you do have to kind of push. And I always say to them, I'm like, "Oh, I bet you're sick of hearing from me," because I do talk to them a lot. And I think as long as you're once you've built that relationship up, you can be a bit more annoying and kind of message people a bit more. And kind of just be a bit more informally like, "Oh, where are we up to with this?" And, "How's that going?" And I think ultimately, if you've got something super urgent, you can push for that to get some priority. And because if something is broken and you need it fixing, ultimately they understand that there is business requirement and like, yes, this thing over here might have been requested by X person, but this thing here is urgent and will need doing. So they are like, you can always, like, they're not stupid. They do have an understanding of the fact that, like, if something's broken, it needs fixing, and things like that. I think in terms of potential technical requirements, I have come across, kind of when we've been discussing things, and maybe someone who's higher up than myself will have put something forward. But I think because I think often I think because, especially being in-house, you do have different relationships with people, and there is, they have specifically employed you for that role. I would say that often I've never felt uncomfortable expressing my opinion, although saying that, I'm not the kind of person that feels uncomfortable expressing my opinion generally. But I would say I will, if you are having to communicate that to someone, again, you have to know exactly why what you're doing is beneficial. And again, you have to be able to put it in to the terms that they will understand, which is usually like, okay, if you do this, this bad thing's going to happen over here, but I've got a solution here that will tackle what you're after, but also won't break this over here. And try and keep it simple, because you just don't want to get too techie unless they start. If they ask more questions, obviously, then you can provide more context, but try and keep it. If you're dealing with C-suite people, especially, or like, high up people, they don't have time to listen to. They generally don't have time to listen to like big explanations. They want to know right now. Okay, well, so if this is wrong, what's right? Why is that wrong? Why is that right? Summarize it. If you can't summarize it, or something, like, if you can't summarize it in like a sentence, then it's too in depth. They just want you to tell them directly, this is why that won't work. Here's a solution. Or if you don't have an alternative solution, just be honest and say, I'll need to take that away, and we'll need to take that away and have a look at it. The classic, don't make up nonsense.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like, being honest about not making up stuff, and not just like, accelerating it for the sake of accelerating it. Or like, I know I've experienced this from the other side of just like, you just kind of want to do some work and keep yourself busy. It's like, is that actually a priority, or are you just kind of doing that to like tick some boxes? Like, yeah, actually, and thankfully we get people like you, Alison, who are able to call people out and stuff, and be able to be like, yeah, I'm not afraid to call you out on this stuff. And I'm sure it happens from the other side of it as well, where you get, if you're not doing what we talked about earlier, where you're not communicating and you're not prioritizing correctly, you can get called out as well. And then you have to be in that position of like, I need to justify this thing. So I guess, how do you go about communicating the value of SEO to people? You mentioned earlier, like, you assume some developers know SEO, right? And some, everybody, it's 2026, people know what SEO means. How do you actually go about explaining that stuff? Because I think you're right. A lot of people still don't really know what a lot of that means.
I think it's an interesting one, because it depends on. Sometimes you won't get the chance to explain to a developer why it needs doing, which is why it's so important that you put together good, detailed technical requirements, because they understand that. They understand this needs to do this, and in this situation it needs to do this, and in this situation it needs to do this. They understand that. They might not understand exactly why you're doing it, but they understand the technical aspect and the requirement. Some will be really genuinely interested, and I've spent loads of time talking through more detailed specifics about how crawling works and all these things, so that some of them do have a deeper understanding. But you won't get that opportunity with every developer, especially if you're working with big teams. So again, a lot of the time, when it comes to value, you're probably communicating more with someone who's managing the workload and managing what goes through to the developers. If you're in a big organization, I've not worked really with many smaller organizations, so my experience is very strongly around large international organizations. So from my perspective, that's why it's so key to make sure your technical ticket raising or putting together what's going to go into ticket is really technically sound in terms of what your requirements are, because you may not really get the opportunity to explain to a developer, all of the ins and outs of how Google might crawl this, and why this would result, and exactly what that might result in, and those kind of things. You might not get that full time to go through it with them, but if you do, give them the explanation if they're interested. Like I said, I have spent quite a bit of time with people at various levels going through more technical details of things so that they understand. And funnily enough, the developers will probably understand it better than some of the non technical people, because they do actually understand the concept of, they understand a lot more about the concept of robots and spiders and all the fun stuff that accesses a site more than potentially a CMO will. So yeah, they've actually got background knowledge that will go with it. I always try and give the developers reference points as well, like of anything that, like, I will often put like additional info that they can go and read on the on my tickets as well. So if there's Google developers site's got loads of great info specifically for developers, so I will often put a link to that on there, because another thing I found is a lot of the time they won't go and actively seek that stuff out. They'll use their developer knowledge to do what they need to do. So sometimes it's also good that, because that will give them, again, it will give them more context that they can read if they want to read it. If they don't have time, at least you've given them the technical requirements and they can crack on.
That's a really interesting point, like adding that almost like you mentioned at the very, very start of the episode, like a little read more button, almost like like
It's
if you
all
want more
SEO.
info, here you go.
You can honestly, you can take the principles of SEO and apply them to like a lot of communication in terms of, these kind of things. Where are you adding your informational gain for these people?
I love it, mate. I love it. Last thing, let's talk about how you I guess I mentioned my experience with having a backlog of stuff. You get stuck with a lot of resource that is just not available or gets deprioritized for whatever reason. Have you ever had to go through that process where you kind of resurrect a ticket, for want of a better phrase, like, oh, it's been sat in the backlog for 6 months or whatever it is, and how you get that process of like, we should probably come back around to this at some point? How do you go about reprioritizing that and resurrecting that and bringing that back to attention if it has gone ignored for too long?
Oh, super easy. Just wait for the issue.
Wait until it breaks.
Yeah, wait until it breaks, because once it's broken, then you've got your solid data there to show that it's broken. No,
See, I was right. I
obviously
was
you
right 6
try.
months ago.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it happens. It really does happen when you're strapped, when resource is strapped, and it is genuinely one way of prioritizing something higher, is if you do start to notice that it is causing issues. That does, because a new request versus an issue, they are two kind of different levels to a degree. A new request is something that they'll look at and be like, well, it's fine as it is, kind of, but it's an improvement, right? That's an improvement
Mm,
over there. An issue is something's going wrong and now we need to fix it. So if something, which you always hope it doesn't, if some kind of request that you've put in isn't getting much traction, if you do start seeing it come up, then I'd hope that you would anyway. But utilize that to push it up the scale of prioritization, because obviously the urgency goes up. So if you're using your, what's it called again, the
Eisenhower matrix.
Eisenhower matrix, that's going to push your urgency up because it's now a live issue.
Mm,
And honestly, that can be the way that you do it sometimes. I think otherwise, gathering more data, like I suppose at least a 6 months time period, you'd hope would maybe give
mm,
you some space to gather some more data. Also, really keep an eye on what what people are publishing out in the SEO industry. Like in my role, I don't get a huge amount of time for experimenting and that kind of stuff. So, and because things have to go through such a tight development process, trying to experiment with technical stuff is more challenging because you have to really justify why the work's being done, because there is this resource is finite, so you have to justify it. So keep an eye on what other people are doing in the industry, and you may well come across someone who's put together an experiment that really shows the impact of doing what you're trying to do, and in which case you can utilize that evidence as something that you can then show your business as, look, this has been experimented with here. Here's some results that this other business has seen. You know, this is the kind of thing that we're looking to replicate doing this. And then hopefully, if it's justifiable enough, you'll be able to up the priority. If it's not, then maybe you shouldn't be upping the priority.
Yeah, if you have to fight too hard to prioritize it, then maybe it's not worth prioritizing. I like that. I like that a lot. If you have to justify it to yourself, you're like,
Yeah,
if I can't
exactly.
explain it to myself, I probably shouldn't try and justify it to someone else.
Exactly. But yeah, so just data doesn't have to be your own, I suppose, is kind of what I'm saying. It can be other people's that you can use as justification.
Yeah, I've had that happen with obviously we cover a lot of the news on our newsletter and things like that. So I'm always trying to keep up to date with what's going on and literally sharing articles with uh like clients and stuff like that, being like, oh yeah, do you remember I told you about this thing? Well, now it's gone live for everyone and you need to be thinking about this thing. We need to reprioritize this thing. Like the amount of stuff that's changing. Obviously, I know a lot of stuff changing with LLMs and AI mode and AI search and all this kind of thing. And like, yeah, you kind of need to start thinking about this stuff. And maybe it's not going to be, transformative for your traffic necessarily, but it's future proofing, right? It's something, if you didn't think about it 6 months ago, are you going to think about it in 6 months' time or wait until everyone else has done it and you're the last one catching up, right?
And there's so much talk about how we kind of demonstrate to businesses AI stuff, and especially in terms of, everyone's so excited about it, but actually, the what the traffic you're getting from it is still really low, and as a channel it's actually still very, very low, kind of that kind of stuff. Well, if there is a bandwagon to jump on, if you've got a technical thing and everyone's hyped about something and you really want to get it through, maybe just try jumping on that bandwagon a little bit. It goes against kind of goes against everything we believe in to a degree, but if you think, oh, look, everyone's really, really concerned about this specific thing right now, and you've got a ticket, you've got something waiting in the background that's, you know, potentially tied to making that do better, and you really want it done above other things. I think that's key to remember. You want it done above other things because obviously you're going to be taking resource away from the other things that you've got in your queue. Then see if you can jump on the bandwagon a bit and get something pushed through, because that's what people are hyped about.
Yeah, yeah. If you can get it like
I've not had to do that, but I would.
you're not past it. You're not beyond it.
Yeah.
Resorting
Oh
to
no,
cool,
no.
trendy things and bandwagon jumping.
Yeah, exactly. Got to use all everything you can sometimes to get technical work done.
Exactly. And like you said, if you're getting it from an external point of view, then that's less work for you. You don't have to go and get all of your data and do all this stuff. If you've got like another case study or an article or whatever, then ta-da, you've got the data there ready for you already. You can prioritize your work
Exactly.
somewhere else.
Like I said, especially in a role in a lot of roles, you might not have the opportunity to go away and do experimentation a lot. So a lot of those can really be helpful in terms of demonstrating value,
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
especially if it's like the same sort of area as you're in.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I think that's a huge part of like giving an e-commerce client an example from an e-commerce like huge site or similar size site or anything like that. I've even used it where I've seen competitors doing stuff and then been like, somebody wrote a case study about one of your competitors and here's why you should care about it. I know I did a very TikTok, YouTube thumbnail, and here's 6 reasons why you should care. You won't believe number 3.
I thought it was going to be the title for a LinkedIn post. I got married, and these are the 5 things I learned about business.
Exactly. So let's round things off with some recommendations. What is one actionable thing you can recommend to the viewers and listeners to start doing right now?
Get comfy with writing up full technical requirements. Get those templates and examples from whoever you're working with if you haven't already, and see how it compares with how you're sending things over, and then dive into trying to send it over in the same way. And I'm sure anyone who's working on those technical requirements will really appreciate the move to trying to make them personalized to their processes.
Nice. I think that's a good, quick little thing to get stuff done.
Easy.
Make stuff easier. Make your life easier. Make everyone's life easier. Exactly.
Well, it does make your life easier in that the idea will be that you'll get less questions as well, and then you'll have less issues to raise at the end of it if you're really scoping things out technically. So yeah, ideally.
Nice. Speaking of things that make things easier, what is a tool or piece of software that you think deserves a bit more attention?
I mean, deserves more attention. I think that all the ones that I really like, I think get loads of great attention, but I really like Wayk. I think that's a great tool at the moment. From an AI perspective, I think it's, they're really doing some great stuff there. And what I think are for very reasonable prices. Um, and I've really been coming into my own a bit, enjoying Sitebob recently for more like um, when I'm dealing with more frequent crawling and assessing sites, because it's just got that great interface that kind of, so you can highlight things pretty quickly if you're doing things, if you're trying to fit in. Because I also do use Screaming Frog, but I think Sitebob's great for kind of if you're doing daily crawls and kind of trying to speed up that process a little bit.
We love both of those. I think we use both of those pretty regularly here in the team. So definitely, yeah. I know what the guys Dixon and the team at Wayk are doing is really, really interesting. And I think there's a lot of crap AI visibility stuff, and when something actually seems to be genuine and taking proper consideration into this sort of stuff, it deserves mentioning. So yeah, I appreciate that. And Sitebob, long-term friends of the show. Shout out to Patrick, Jojo, Gareth and the team. They're doing awesome work as well.
Yeah.
Last but not least, sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say I love the interface. It's good.
It is. We're talking about good UX. Exactly.
Exactly.
Last but not least, recommend something you've been enjoying recently. I know you're a big nerd. No, I mean that in the biggest compliment, because I am also a big nerd.
If you can't tell by my background of Lego nerd stuff.
Literally got like Boba Fett here. There's a Lego thing just off camera here as well. And this is work. Like, you don't even want to see my home office. So what have you been enjoying recently, mate? Has it been a film, a TV show, a podcast, books, bands? What have you been enjoying recently? Let's get nerdy.
Oh, I mean, I love so much stuff. I am a big nerd, and I play Dungeons and Dragons. I will be playing it later tonight, actually.
Nice.
So I'm always looking forward to that. If I would recommend it to everyone, all you need is a little sprinkle of imagination, and if you enjoy putting on silly accents, oh my days, it's the game for you. So much fun. And I would sell it to people as don't get carried away thinking too much about like the rules and like all the different things that you need to learn. It's basically just a space to create nonsense. You can do whatever you want in the D&D world. That's amazing. And often all you have to do is find a suitable dice roll to figure out whether or not you're doing it well. So yeah, absolutely adore D&D. I would say I'm certainly a chaotic player of that. It's where all of my nonsense spews out of me. Um, and then aside from that, I enjoy reading, a slightly quieter hobby. I'm currently reading a book called Butter, which I would highly recommend. It's um, it's an interesting. It's translated from a Japanese, and about uh, it's about a journalist who becomes kind of obsessed with a lady in prison who's accused of or who's um, accused of murdering three men, but
Mm.
she's like obsessed with food. And yeah, it's just kind of their relationship and some great feminist undertones. So it's really good, really good.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm really trying to get back into reading at the moment. I for Christmas I got a Kobo, like the little Kindly type thing, and one of those like cheaper knockoff ones that you can just you download
Yeah,
the things onto it directly, kind of thing. And that has just completely changed my reading habits. Like having that on my bedside table next to me, just ready to go, has been so much fun. And there seems to be a lot of, and maybe this is me sounding very old here, but like a lot of novels that just have one word as the title. Like
yeah,
that became a trend a little while ago, and I'm now catching up. And there's I recently read Itch exclamation mark. There's Butter. There was another one I literally got it like 99p sale kind of thing the other day, and it was just one word. I'm like, what is going on here? Everyone's just doing one word. It's really weird.
yeah. Yeah, I quite like a horror book, so
Mm,
I got back into reading like around probably like the beginning of 2025, and then I ended up kind of getting once I got back into it, ended up reading like 24 books in the year, so it was like two a month, and I was like, oh, cool, I'm definitely back. I'm definitely enjoying this. So I've got a reading goal this year of like 30 books, but I'm already ahead of schedule, so I'm quite happy with that. And then, but yeah, I love like a Stephen King. I've been reading
mm.
quite a few of his books. They're really good. And yeah, and then I've got a couple of sci-fi books coming up that I'm going to read. So I've just ordered Project Hail Mary, which is coming out as a film
Love it.
with Ryan Gosling in, and I'm really excited to read it because I want to read it and not get any spoilers from the film. I've got a
Mm.
lot of friends that recommend it as well, so I know it's going to be brilliant, and I can't wait to read it once I finish Butter. So, yeah, love reading.
Have you avoided the trailers for Project Hail Mary and everything like that?
I try my best to. I've seen them, so I'm more
I think
familiar
I
than I
think they're
was
I think
with
they're
what it's going to
well
be about.
spoilery. I'm a
Yeah,
huge Andy Weir fan. I read The Martian pretty much when it came out and have loved Andy Weir. I really like oh god, what's the other one? Artemis, I think it's called, something like that.
yeah, because
That
I think when I was ordering it, I saw the three book
yeah,
thing, but I'm a
yeah.
cheapskate, so I just ordered the one.
Yeah, I read The Martian like well over 10 years ago, and I think the film is brilliant as well. And I'm really excited to see Project Hail Mary. I read the book a couple of years ago and then saw the trailer, and I was like, hold on a minute. You are like spoiling the hell out of this stuff. Like
Oh
going
no,
into the
that
book,
means I've seen the spoilers already.
you've seen some spoilers already, mate. But I think it's totally still worth reading. Like you don't know the details, obviously, but I was surprised how much they showed because it's a much things that are shown in the trailer are big reveals in the book, if that makes sense. You're like,
Oh,
oh,
okay,
this is
yeah,
what this means, or this is what this person is or does, or whatever. I'm keeping very vague, obviously. Uh, but suddenly you realize, like, oh, right, okay, you're just showing that on screen. Sure, okay. I know the marketing of books and movies is very different. You have to adapt to the medium and all that kind of stuff. But like, I was a bit annoyed. But I've heard amazing things about the movie, so I'm excited to see the
yeah.
film as
I'm
well.
yeah. I'm kind of like trying to get through Butter now because it's quite a big book. Trying to get
Mm.
through it, so that I can get through Project Hail Mary and then watch the film. Although saying that, I did that for Frankenstein. And then the film, the Guillermo del Toro version that just came out, is so different from the book that I was
Yep.
like, I just spent the whole film like, this isn't what happens. So, and I've just read Wuthering Heights as well, so I already know that that's really different from the book.
Yep.
But I mean, it is also Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi, so I don't think I can pass up the opportunity to watch them have a romance together. I think it will be the romance of the century.
Yeah, I talked about that with Jessica, who I mentioned earlier on in the show. A huge reader as well, and really into Wuthering Heights. Really recommended it, despite a lot of the reviews and stuff like that. But you're totally right about Frankenstein and things like that. I think you find that a lot where you get those, I guess, things that have been adapted a lot over the years. Multiple different versions of Frankenstein and Dracula and Sherlock Holmes and all this kind of stuff, right? You get like, okay, what's the latest version? How is this different from all the other ones? And I think we had a really good example of that a few years ago where we had like the 2 Pinocchio movies at the same time. And we also had 2 Jungle Book movies at the same time. And you're like, why does this keep happening? Like, stop
Yeah,
releasing basically the same thing, but they're often like vastly different takes on what
yeah.
seems to be the same
With
story, right?
Frankenstein, I was like, they should just say this is inspired by Frankenstein, because
Mm,
the story is so different in there. Like, the characters are like so far removed from what they are in the book.
yeah.
It's crazy. I'd finished reading the book and then I was like, brilliant, can't wait to watch the film. And even just literally as soon as it started, I was like, that's not what happens in the book. And I just spent the whole film like, that's not what happens in the book. Beautiful film, great film. I just sometimes wish they'd be a bit less like Frankenstein, because if you read the book and then watch the film, you're like, these are it's inspired by. It's got like a couple of the characters, but they're not really that similar to how they are in the books. The storyline is quite far removed from the storyline in the book as well. So it's yeah, it was a great film and a great book, just so different.
Agreed. Yeah, yeah. And before we leave, I have to ask, what's happening in your D&D campaign? Like, what's going on? What's going to happen tonight? Who are you playing as? Are you still your tiefling sorcerer? Is this still the
I
plan?
am, yeah.
Okay, nice.
Um we we are currently headed
Love you've
to, I've
actually got
got
your
my
notepad
notes
there.
here.
Love it, mate. Love
Yeah. More notes than I ever make for work.
it.
Um, we're in in a town city at the moment, where they've all got these marks on them, and you've got to be out by, if you've not got a mark, you've got to be out by the end of the day. But we've met some people who want to rebel against the system. Seems like it's some kind of magic system, based on
Mm.
what they drink out of some well. And yeah, so we're currently in a city trying to decide what we're going to do, because we're actually only there to find 50 people to come fight somewhere else. So we're we're kind of figuring out at the moment whether or not we stay there and do something about what's going on in that city, whether we go back, try and recruit people, then go back, then come back, recruit people, go back, forget about the city. There's
Interesting.
a lot of
Yeah.
stuff to be decided.
I love it, mate. I love that kind of stuff where you get the yeah, like, oh, we didn't even mean to come here to do that. We're doing one thing. Again, very ADHD of you, right? Like we have to like, we're off doing
Yeah,
this one thing.
side
We
quests.
just need to go to this one town to do this thing, and then in that town, all hell breaks loose, and you have to do this other thing as well. And it's like, okay, yeah, yeah. Now we're off doing another thing.
Yeah, classic. Yeah, all good
I-
fun. It takes us so long to make decisions as well. We're pretty awful at taking pretty much like an hour to just make a decision about like whether we open a door or whether we walk this way or that way. So yeah, we take our time.
as does as a person who DM'd a 5-year long campaign that ended last year, people take their time. Yes, I agree.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been playing D&D since I was, like 17, 18 or something like that, so, like, half my life, basically, and never finished a campaign once. And then twice in 2025, I finished campaigns. One I was playing in and one I was DMing. I was like, what? How did this all culminated at the same time? And me and the DM were not talking, like two completely separate groups apart from me. And it was a weird moment where like within like 6 weeks of each other, they both finished. I was like, oh, what do I do with my
This
life
is
now?
new.
This is really weird. Yeah, it was so strange.
Yeah, I don't think we've yet to finish a campaign.
They are,
You
yeah,
start out
well,
with the best intentions.
always. Oh, thank you so much for joining, mate. It's been a pleasure talking all technical prioritization and then getting nerdy and all that other fun stuff. Where can people keep up with you talking about SEO, talking about technical stuff and all that good things?
LinkedIn. Yeah, feel free to follow me on LinkedIn. I'm going to try and post more interesting stuff, as well as reposting more stuff that I find interesting. And yeah, hopefully you'll see me around at some conferences and things like that. Feel free to say hi. I'm going to be at Brighton SEO, and I'm going to be in Antalya at the Search and Stuff conference out
Hey,
there
nice.
in October. So I'm really excited about that. And then, yeah, just keep an eye out for some other ones to go to as well. But yeah, so if you see me around, do feel free to pop over and say hello.
Nice. Go and, yeah, two conferences I know a lot of our viewers and listeners are already aware of. But yeah, go and check out Brighton SEO, Search and Stuff, and go and say hi to Alison if you see her around at any other future conferences. Keep an eye out for a nerdy t-shirt and the black and white hair. You know, it's easy to spot you in a crowd, right?
My trademark, yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much, mate. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Jack. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
And that wraps up this week's episode. Thank you so much for joining me, to Alison Moss. Thank you so much for watching and listening, wherever you're watching and listening. And if you haven't already, like I said, please do go and get tickets for either the live podcast coming up on the 29th of April or Search Norwich XL on the 24th of December. Get tickets for both. Why not? If you're going to be in Brighton in April and Norwich in September, come and join us, have a lovely time, and enjoy two fantastic events, basically. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Alison as much as I did. Fun fact, Alison and I talked probably for like 40 to 60 minutes before and after the podcast as well. We continued talking about nerdy things and SEO and all kinds of other stuff. Really, really fun conversation with Alison, and I'm sure hopefully you will see her on more podcasts and maybe some conferences speaking on stage in the not too distant future as well. If you haven't already, of course, please do like and subscribe and all that good stuff. You've made it all the way to the end here. Follow us on Spotify, like on YouTube, subscribe on YouTube, hit the notification bell, review us on Apple Podcasts, all that good stuff to help spread the word of Candour, and leave comments as well. We got some fantastic comments on a recent episode. People asking, oh, why did I recommend this thing for SEO? Do I agree with this? And people just saying they enjoy the podcast. Really, really enjoy getting those kind of comments, whether you have feedback or questions or whatever it is. Please do get in touch. You can comment on Spotify, you can comment on YouTube, and let me know what you think of the show overall. With that all out of the way, we have some fantastic guests coming up in the next few weeks. Mark Williams Cook will hopefully be back here in the studio. You'll get another solo episode from me probably next week, doing a little news recap that I did last month as well. And I have awesome people like the returning Annie Mae Hodge back in the studio. Yes, I know Annie Mae is finally making her triumphant return to Search with Candour, I think 3 years after I originally interviewed her. And oh boy, is there a lot to talk about when it comes to social media and SEO and how that has changed. The last time we had a conversation was when all of the is TikTok a search engine conversation was happening. And a lot has changed since then. So yeah, stay tuned for that in hopefully probably sort of mid-April, end of April sort of time is my plan. And yeah, plenty more other awesome guests coming up over the next few weeks as well. So thank you so much for watching. Thanks so much for listening. And I will see you next week.